What do I want to talk about? I want to talk about Jerome Powell as well. Jerome Powell and Big DT, they are beefing. Uh, they are beefing. Donald Trump wants Jerome Powell to do something. Jerome Powell doesn't want to do it. Who's Jerome Powell? Jerome Powell is the Fed chair of the Reserve Bank, SA America, right? This guy. So this is Jerome. Jerome Jerome has been in charge since I don't know, probably Biden years since Biden since when was when when did Powell take over, become Fed chair? Let's see. Yeah, 2018. That's Trump time, right? No, Biden time. I mean, no, it's Trump time. It's Trump. Yeah, what would Trump? Because Trump ophuma ngo 2020, right? Then wangena Biden. Then yeah. So, but it wafika late in Trump's first term, right? So Jerome Powell is Fed chair. He's the equivalent of Kganyago here in South Africa. Like let's say Mr. Lere, let's say Kganyago. So Jerome is the equivalent of that guy. So whenever they talk about interest rates, when they go up or down, he's the chairman of the board, right? He presents what the Fed is going to do about the interest rate, right? So now the problem is that he's been beefing with DT about whether the interest rate should go up or down. Donald Trump wants the interest rates to go down, right? Why does he want to do that? Interest rates, when they are low, they stimulate the economy, right? People want to take more credit. Companies want to take more credit, right? Companies build more buildings, they build more factories. We just talked about assets, liabilities, and equities 2 minutes ago, right? So if my interest rates are low, it pretty much stimulates the economy. It's good for the economy, right? But then on the other hand, there's a problem or a balancing act that has to be done when it comes to our interest rates, whether we're keeping them high or low, right? You don't want too low interest rate such that there's too much money in the world because that causes inflation, right? And then at the same time, you don't want too much scarcity of email or interest rates, they are so high such that people can't afford them and you're technically squeezing the consumer and even our businesses, right? So that balancing act is done by the Reserve Bank. Every country has a Reserve Bank, right? So in America is the Fed chair. Like the Fed chair is pretty much the Fed chair. I mean, is the Reserve Bank of the world because they pretty much work around the IMF. IMF is the International Monetary Fund, and they write loans for everyone in the world, right? Countries, in fact. So it's those sort of supranatural, or they're called supranational organizations, right? That are just overseeing countries. So the Fed, there's this thing that, or the Reserve Bank, every Reserve Bank, in fact, should operate independently, right? Independent of politicians. I'm a politician in Melengasholud. Just do politics and leave the banking to bankers, right? And especially to inflation. Because think about it as well. Politicians, they have interests. They have their own interests and they have their own ulterior motives as well, right? For example, if we're going to election next year, wouldn't you be incentivized as a politician to start printing money and then you start making, or you make the nation feel like things are really going great when they're really not, right? Because that amount or that money you're printing is going to come back to bite you in a form of inflation. All of a sudden, isinkwa sesibiza 1,000 rand. Those are the repercussions when inflation gets out of control. We saw it in Zimbabwe, right? We're going to watch a video about that later. We saw it in Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, it happens when inflation gets out of control, right? So that balancing act has to be done by the Reserve Bank, independent of political influence. But now, Trump wants to intervene. I mean, he's intervening in oil businesses. He's intervening in every other country's businesses that interest him, at least, right? So he also now wants to dictate In fact, he's been lobbying that he wants to put his own person there. So what they've done, they've hit this old man with a subpoena, man. What is a subpoena? Let's see this. These American terms. Subpoena. So a subpoena is a writ ordering a person to attend a court. It's a summon. I'm a summons. You basically summon to court with a subpoena. Thina la South Africa sifocasa kuma-summons. Hey, nama-summons ebhank. Nama-summons enkantolo. Oh my God, bruh. Oh, we're the best, man. We're the best. The way we just flip stuff up because it's too much. About subpoena, my summons. That's just easy. Anyway, so they issued the Fed chair with summons, alleging criminal activity and alleging something. So let's just watch this video, though.
Good evening. On Friday, the Department of Justice served the Federal Reserve with grand jury subpoenas, threatening a criminal indictment.
Okay, sorry.
Good evening. On Friday, the Department of Justice served the Federal Reserve with grand jury subpoenas, threatening a criminal indictment related to my testimony before the Senate Banking Committee last June. That testimony concerned in part a multi-year project to renovate historic Federal Reserve office buildings. I have deep respect for the rule of law and for accountability in our democracy. No one, certainly not the chair of the Federal Reserve, is above the law. But this unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure. This new threat is not about my testimony last June or about the renovation of the Federal Reserve buildings. It is not about Congress's oversight role.
Okay, so what? This guy. So what they did is they put charges of Batini. So apparently he wanted to renovate. They're renovating a building, the Reserve Bank building. So I guess he had to. Let me see. Powell testify. For renovations. Let's see, because it says DOJ. Okay. You see, I think it was I think no one paid attention even to that testimony because there was a lot of reporting on it. Looks like there wasn't a lot of reporting on it. But basically what he's saying is, I guess this is the renovation. What to know about the DOJ's criminal so they're doing a renovation, I guess. So now Trump is saying with that, so Federal Reserve Chair under criminal investigation over headquarter renovations. It's like, bruh. So the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C. has launched a criminal investigation into Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell over the $2.5 billion renovation of the Fed's headquarters. God damn. Okay. Makes sense. Yo, that's a lot of money, bruh. 2 billion. Okay. You know what? So manje kuthiwani uJerome? uJerome uncinze u2 million ndilintani. Lo babuluke bungeke lungile mfethu. Like yawo yahlupha mfethu uTrump. Yazi uTrump yahlupha. So let's just go back a bit.
Democracy. No one, certainly not the chair of the Federal Reserve, is above the law. But this unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's respect for the rule of law and renovate historic Federal Reserve office buildings. That testimony concerned in part a multi-year project to renovate historic Federal Reserve office buildings. I have deep respect for the rule of law and for accountability in our democracy. No one, certainly not the chair of the Federal Reserve, is above the law. but this unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure. This new threat is not about my testimony last June or about the renovation of the Federal Reserve buildings. It is not about Congress's oversight role. The Fed, through testimony and other public disclosures, made every effort to keep Congress informed about the renovation project. Those are pretexts. The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president. This is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether instead monetary policy will be directed by political pressure or intimidation. I have served at the Federal Reserve under 4 administrations, Republicans and Democrats alike. In every case, I have carried out my duties without political fear or favor, focused solely on our mandate of price stability and maximum employment. Public service sometimes requires standing firm in the face of threats. I will continue to do the job the Senate confirmed me to do, with integrity and a commitment to serving the American people. Thank you. Confirmed me to do.
Yeah, that's basically that. So Jerome akafuni ukuzwa, basically. That's what he's guilty for. He doesn't want to be told. Jerome, drop the rate. Cut the rates by 50 basis points, Jerome. Jerome, you're going to be out of a job, Jerome. Cut the rates. Because there's even, by this time, there's even a guy who's even almost lobbying at this point. Like, he's putting himself out there, putting his opinions about what he thinks about the federal rates and stuff like that. You can already see his campaign. Well, if it was in political terms, it will be campaigning. And it just happens now, he's a Republican. So he's almost a Trump. He's a Trump guy, not even almost. He's a Trump guy. So Jerome's job is really at a threat. But isn't it crazy, though? Isn't it crazy? The narrative painting, it's sort of an emo in America, like, right? They just paint a narrative. Could be true, right? But whenever it is true, you always have to ask about the interest of bringing it up now, because you telling me if he's corrupt, is this the first time he's shown corruption? Because this is at the highest level. Like, this is calling at the highest level. If we're saying Uzontshontshimali, it's like 2.5 billion. You renovate a building of the federal the federal building money. You chow that. That's like you're calling at the highest level, bruh. Like, you're defrauding at the highest level at this point. So you're a professional at this point. You must have had practice. So I'm saying, why didn't they bring it up back then, right? So they bring it up now because it's interesting or it's just convenient, right? But then the narrative goes out there, Yoni Gamala who to corrupt and he's gonna have to fight very hard to prove it, like, right, as he's doing Jengaman. But the narrative is out. Like, he put me in number along Jerome right now. Almost the same way what put me number along in South Africa a couple of months ago, right? There's this, all of that nonsense they were saying. None of it existed. None of it exists. Black and white people know it doesn't exist in South Africa, right? But they will talk about it and they will say it and speak of it like it's the truth. But we will see. Maybe Jerome is corrupt. Maybe he did chow the money, God have been protected all this time. And maybe just this time they're saying he's had enough. So we will see. But Trump is coming for everyone. It's not Venezuela only. It's not South Africa only. Even bankers, central bankers in his own country, they are not safe. Let's
Federal
see this.
Reserve Chair Jerome Powell confirms he's now under criminal investigation by the Justice Department. He said officials are looking into testimony he gave to Congress in June about the Federal Reserve's renovation of its D.C. headquarters. But Powell claimed the probe is actually tied to, quote, threats and ongoing pressure by the Trump administration.
The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates.
Ongoing renovations, as you may recall, subpoenas related to be violating the law. Now, Powell disputes all that and described this new probe as unprecedented action, which he says should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure related to interest rates and lowering interest rates. A DOJ spokesperson in a statement did not specifically reference this case, but said that the Attorney General has instructed her U.S. attorneys to prioritize investigating any abuse of taxpayer dollars. But lawmakers across both sides of the aisle are sounding the alarm. Republican Tom Tillis said this in a statement in part: if there were any remaining doubt whether advisors Republican Tom Tillis said this in a statement in part: if there were any remaining doubt whether advisors within the Trump administration are actively pushing to end the independence of the Federal Reserve, there should be none. Other lawmakers warn that undermining that independence could destabilize markets. Now, President Trump told NBC News in a phone call Sunday night that he didn't know about this probe. As you may recall, it was President Trump who appointed Powell as Fed chair during his first term. But since then, he's repeatedly criticized him and has floated even firing him as recently as last month, Errol.
All right.
Yeah. He appointed him. When 2018. He's the one who made him the chair. So I don't know what changed. But I think more than anything, what changed between the first term Trump and second term Trump is the attitude. I think second term Trump gives zero fucks, bruh. I don't want to lie to you. I think second term Trump really doesn't care. I mean, he's 80. He's 80 something, bruh. And old people tend to don't care, but not even they don't care, bruh. They decide what matters to them. They've brought life to very simple things, right? They know what matters. They know what doesn't matter. And they go ahead and do what matters. And how you feel about it, good luck, right? And I think that's pretty much the attitude he's taken. Because even in the first term, he really tried. You could tell Uguti, he was trying a lot to win over Abantu, win over Ama countries as far as being diplomatic and stuff, right? But this time, none of that. The diplomacy is out the window as far as Trump is concerned. It's almost like, you know what, I'm going to come here and do what I want to do. How y'all feel about it is for the benefit of America. I mean, I guess everyone who's in support of him, that's what he's saying, MAGA. Because, think of it first term, he was saying he's going to make Mexico build the wall, bruh. Or Mexico is a bonda. But he didn't do it, But I want to think this second term Trump, he would do it. If he had that rhetoric coming into the second term, I'm 100% sure by now. Or if it was up there, my priorities he would have started with it by now because he really doesn't care this time. There's a World Cup next year. You would think ukuthi someone who's hosting a World Cup Ebola would behave in a certain way diplomatically, try not to alienate a lot of people. But you have ICE shooting Americans in the street. Like, you have American police shooting Americans in the street. Females at that. Not even, females at that. So it's a different country. It's almost like 2013, 2014, 15, Obama, America. It's like America is getting back to that. But anyways, let's watch this one more time.
Overnight, with word that the Department of Justice is has launched a criminal investigation into Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve. They say,
just see it right here, net approval rating per Democrats.
Talks about Fed independence, right? How important do the American people think that is?
Very, very.
And this is the important part, right? This is the important part about independence, because, it's a political question as much as it's an economic question, right? I guess this is where politics and business and finance sort of interact, because as much as it's a finance institution, but it's a political institution, right? Because a decision they make have repercussions. They have repercussions that trickle down all the way to the real economy, not just it affects some investors and it only affects you if you have a portfolio of invest. No, it affects your price of bread. It affects the price of or your taxi fare, Kokai. And it really starts in America, trickling down all the way to even like South Africa, because whatever America does, you can pretty much catch up and see what South Africa is doing, case in point, right? We pretty much almost we almost mirror what America is doing, because they're up there with our trading partners. And as far as financing, they are the central hub for financing, global finance in the world, right? You have IMF and you have World Bank in there. So everything sort of revolves around them, right? But I wanted to talk about, I don't know if I can find a Malema video where he talks about nationalizing of banks without compensation. Like, it's a political question. It's a political question.
Thank you very much.
Right.
It is indeed not shocking that
Bring it home.
the ANC has sent the so-called communists to come and argue against one of the fundamental principles of communism. Under Joe Slovo interest in the ANC. That's what they are doing. And that all of you who come here to give us examples of the banks that were nationalized and collapsed, you use African states and indirectly trying to create an impression that it is black African governments which cannot run completely because of the banks. When we went into a recession, it was the banks, and those banks were not owned by the state. They were privately owned. So who said private ownership is inherently progressive and successful? There are many examples of private ownership which have failed in the banking sector. None of you gave example of those because they are white run, and therefore white people can never be wrong. The state is black run and therefore cannot be relied upon. Who collapsed African Bank? African Bank was not state run. It was privately run, yet it still collapsed. So it is incorrect to suggest that everything else that is black run is going to fail. We must say to the ANC that the so-called radical economic transformation is just a lip service. You don't mean anything. We agree entirely that to nationalize under you will be the most dangerous thing to do. But we bring these motions here to expose your inconsistency.
You see, You see, that's the thing with nationalization. Like you can nationalize a bank as Malema. Maybe you have the best intentions, right? Let's just assume let's assume the best. You have the best intentions, but you don't know the third person who'll be in charge after you. What would be their intentions, right? And more than black and white, right? More than black and white. I mean, they are white and they are advocating for centralizing the bank, right? So it's more of a thinking that leans towards market, right? Like free market. I spoke about this from one of my other videos of saying free markets believe in such, like, let the market be. It's almost like the law of the jungle, right? Like even with Starlink right now wanting to come to South Africa, right? Starlink wants to come in South Africa, but bafuna EPEE card, my comrade, right? And then the guys who believe in free markets, they'll tell you this: don't interfere with it. Like all these structures, BEE structures or any other structures from government, especially imposed by the government, we don't need them, right? We believe in free markets. Let Starlink come, and whoever wants to compete, they will compete with Starlink. They have to compete purely based on the product offering or the price. Either they're going to charge a lower price. I mean, we have rain here in South Africa, right? Surely when Starlink comes, they will compete with rain. So people who believe in free markets, they'll tell you that. Let free markets be. Let people choose. And then as well, they also will tell you when it comes to intervention by the Reserve Bank, they would want to see minimal as possible, like as low intervention from the Reserve Bank as possible. Because, like I said, let the market flow. If a company or like Umalem was talking about banks right here, if a bank goes bust, it's okay, right? That means that bank was weak. There's an entrepreneur somewhere who's got ideas, better ideas, and who knows how to manage risk better, who's going to develop or who's going to build a better bank that's going to last 100 more years, right? And then people who don't believe in free markets, almost like a Malema and stuff, right, which are called like socialist or communist, they will tell you that sorry, I was fixing it. There's a puzzle here on TikTok. Sorry for that. So they will tell you, we want government intervention. Like you hear him saying, we want government intervention. Like he's saying that you guys are saying you don't want to nationalize because you, the ANC, are corrupt and you are going to fuck this project up. So we don't want to nationalize with you guys in charge. We'd rather be in charge because we won't mess it up, right? That's what he's saying. But he's saying we, the government, or the government of the day, then we will be interfering in the economy in this instance of owning the Reserve Bank, right, or nationalizing the Reserve Bank and giving the Reserve Bank a mandate, right? So it's that sort of thinking, or those two school of thoughts, right, in economics. It's the clash. That's why I'm playing Malema. It's the clash of those two school of thoughts in economics. But let's
Just say, to quote the movie Tootsie, this is one nutty hospital, this back and forth. My goodness gracious. They think it's incredibly important that the Fed acts independently of Donald Trump, and they think it's best for the economy. We're talking about more than 2/3 of adults, 68%, 91% of Democrats, 75% of independents, and even 41%, 2/5 of Trump's base thinks it's important that the Fed acts independently of Trump for the best of the economy. So when you get 41% of Republicans and 91% of
I think that right there kind of blows Trump out the water, because even like that 41%, are Republicans, right? And those are basic Trump, which are like right people who believe in free markets and capitalism and stuff like that, right? Those are sort of the recurring themes you'd find. So you see 41% of them, they're saying they want an independent Reserve Bank. And then this 91%, it's Democrats. Democrats as much as they are Americans, because Americans, as much as they don't think like Malema purely in terms of black and white, because Malema's thinking is almost binary, right? He sees it for what he sees it, and he puts it like how he sees it, right? But Democrats are almost the closest thing you'd get to Malema in America, right? They believe in social grants. They believe in the government getting involved in some degree, right? As compared to Republicans. Republicans, they don't want none of that. Like, scratch those social security checks. I'm a grant like South Africa, 350. Scratch it. They don't want none of that shit. If you're weak, the market will put you aside. That's basically what they believe in. The market decides. Even when it comes to wages and salaries, as case, even when it comes to wages and salaries, they don't believe in what is this? Minimum wage. They don't believe in minimum wage because minimum wage is set by the government, right? They're saying if you're a worker and you're efficient, you will be hired. If you're not hired, I will be fired. I should be able to fire you. They don't believe in unions. Those are free market people. They don't like unions because some unions are totally can't. That's what they say. That's their thinking, right?
For the best of the economy. So when you get 41% of Republicans and 91% of Democrats agreeing on something with 75% of independents, you know it is a popular position. The bottom line is the American people vigorously disagree with the President of the United States on this. They want a Fed that acts independently of him because they think it's best for the economy.
So the Trump administration very clearly, to an extent, picking a fight
Price changes like maybe every month, but right now it's like every week.
Yo, I've said so much. I was saying, you can't put the power to politicians, right? So I've been on mute this whole time on YouTube. Shit. So you can't put the power of the Reserve Bank on politicians, because politicians, they're their own interest, right? We saw it in Zimbabwe. I mean, I have a Zimbabwe video up right now. They have their own interest as far as the people are concerned. So, then I was looking at the Chinese Reserve Bank, if it is centrally controlled, and it's not centrally, I mean, it's not independent rather, right? So it decides, but then while it has legal mandates for independent function, major monetary decisions require approval from higher government bodies, reflecting China's centralized political system where ultimate power rests with the party state. So they're not really a Malema at China, like fully fledged left, such that they believe in full government full government intervention. But as well, they don't believe in full private sector taking control, like you would see in America. Like private sector runs everything in America, right? So in China, they are like a balance of both. They're private, but if you get out of control, like you can't be Elon Musk in China. Jack Ma almost got out of control. They got him back. They recalled him and put him in order. He disappeared. Nowhere to be seen. I can't remember anyone saw like Jack Ma, or can't remember anyone saying they saw Jack Ma, even online. He just disappeared. So that's China. They're a balance of both, right? But politicians have their own ulterior motives. We saw it in Zimbabwe.
Last week I bought some mouthwash for about $52. Yesterday I went back. It's now $125. So generally prices are going up. We can't afford anything. Even the salaries are like close to nothing.
They must put the prices down. Okay. They must put the prices down because it's just too much. We can't afford. Especially we others, we don't go to work. The massive increase across the whole economy. So the economy, as I've said, we are in a recession where now people will not be able to afford. The demand for goods is just going to go down. And what is the end result of that? The end result of that, companies are going to close. People are going to become more poorer than where we were before.
So yeah, this is a video. Last one. Let's just watch this last video. Then we're gonna move to another topic. So it talks about how printing money actually creates inflation, right? Because it's an abstract concept, but it in reality it works, and we saw it in Zimbabwe, right? With this video I just played now. So it was not nice there. It was not nice. Taking 1 trillion is bad. Hey.
In March 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic rocked economies worldwide. Millions of people lost their jobs, and many businesses struggled to survive or shut down completely. Governments responded with some of the largest economic relief packages in history. The United States alone spent $2.2 trillion on a first round of relief. So where did all this money come from? Most countries have a central bank that manages the money supply and is independent from the government to prevent political interference. The government can implement many types of economic policy, like decreasing people's taxes and creating jobs through public infrastructure projects, but it actually can't just increase the money supply. The central bank determines how much money is in circulation at a time. So why can't central banks authorize the printing of unlimited money to help an economy in crisis? They could, but that's a short-term solution that doesn't necessarily boost economic growth in the long term and can actually hurt the economy. Why? With more money in circulation, manufacturers of goods like food, clothing, and cars could respond to demand simply by raising prices, rather than manufacturing more of these goods and creating new jobs in the process. This would mean you could no longer buy as much with the same amount of money, a situation known as inflation. A little bit of inflation, about 2% a year, is considered a sign of economic health, but more can quickly derail an economy. In recent decades, central banks have tried an approach called quantitative easing to infuse the economy with cash while maintaining a low risk of severe inflation. In this approach, a central bank increases cash flow by purchasing another entity's bonds. Anyone can buy bonds from corporations or governments. When you buy a bond, you're essentially loaning money to the company or government with the promise that they'll pay it back later with interest. This is why buying bonds is sometimes referred to as buying debt. When an individual buys a bond, they're using money that's already in circulation. But when the central bank buys a bond, it essentially creates cash, supplying money that didn't exist before in exchange for bonds. Both during the 2008-2009 financial crisis and again in 2020, the United States Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, bought bonds from the US government called Treasury bonds. Historically, many people have purchased these bonds as a safe form of investment, knowing the US government will pay them back with interest. In early 2020, the Federal Reserve pledged to buy unlimited Treasury bonds, loaning the US government an unprecedented amount of money, cash that the government used to fund relief efforts like stimulus checks and unemployment benefits. This isn't equivalent to simply printing money, though it may sound similar. Because of the way bonds are priced, by buying so many, the Federal Reserve effectively lowered the return on them, which incentivizes other investors to lend to riskier entities, like small and mid-sized companies, in order to get a decent return. Encouraging lending this way should help companies of all sizes borrow money to funnel into projects and hires, boosting the economy over time, in addition to helping the government supply people with urgently needed cash in the short term. The Federal Reserve's pledge to buy unlimited government debt has raised some questions and eyebrows. In theory, this means the government could issue more bonds, which the central bank would purchase. The government could then use the money from the new bonds to pay off the old bonds, effectively meaning the government never pays back its debt to the central bank. Citing this and other theoretical scenarios, some economists have raised concerns that a central bank buying government debt is a subversion of a system designed to protect the economy. Others have insisted these measures are necessary and have so far helped stabilize economies. Though quantitative easing has become a lot more common in recent years, it's still relatively new, and potential consequences are still unfolding.
That's pretty much it. They can't just print. Zimbabwe single sasibiza 1 billion at some point. Because imali loses value. It loses value, and think of it like this. There are five loaves of bread in this house, right? 5 loaves of bread in this room, in this flat, right? And then there's 50 rand in flotation. 5 loaves of bread is the food that is everywhere. Like, it's the only food in the world, right? And then there's 50 rand in the world that exists. It's the only money emhlabeni. 5 loaves are the only food in the world, right? So that almost equals what? 1 bread is 10 rand, 10 rand, 10 rand, 10 rand, 50 rand, right? Easy. So now think of it like this. As a person who's selling bread, say I sell 1 bread, now I have 4 bread. So now there's still $50 in flotation, but people who can buy bread, there's $40 in flotation, and I have 4 bread, or four loaves of bread. So now imagine some superficial power or some power that controls money, the printing of money. All of a sudden they print 500 rand more. Now there's 40 rand in flotation, remember? Or let's just say they print 400 rand. Let's to try and make it even. They print 400 rand more, and there's already 4 rand in flotation, and there's only 4 slices that I have as a person or the seller. What am I going to do to make sure I get the most out of these 4 slices or these 4 loaves of bread that I have? Because this guy just printed to 400 extra, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to charge 410 rand, 110 rand for each loaf of bread. So now each loaf of bread is 110 rand instead of 10 rands, because there's just more money that was printed, right? It was printed, and at the same time, it did not match the production of the goods and services that it has to service or it has to buy, because this money that is printed somewhere has to buy goods somewhere, right? So now it usually happens when a company or a country prints a lot of money and then the output does not meet the volume or even the velocity, the speed that this amount of money is being printed with. So people are working, but they're not producing as much as, they're not producing enough goods. So I'm not making enough bread to pretty much satisfy all the money that's out there. And at this point, think about it. I'm not incentivized to, right? I'm not incentivized to produce more. I can only just raise the price. I'm going to make more. In fact, per unit, I'm going to make more. Because now my cost is like this much and my profit is almost all profit. 5,000%, I bet. Right? So that's the point about inflation, and that's the thinking behind it, such that printing money is not necessarily good if you think about it in isolation. It's bad if you think about it in isolation, but if it matches or it is matched with productivity, with a productive society, right, that constantly produces goods and services by daisa and everything, so it kind of evens out. It gets swallowed into the economy, and then the economy grows. Cool. So that's pretty much the thinking behind it. That's inflation. So we started with Jerome Powell, but the whole point was the importance of the independence of a reserve bank, right? Because there's just so much to balance. It's not just as simple as, no, we're going to use it to fight poverty, right? Yes, you use it to fight poverty, but then at the same time, there are other levers that move when you're playing with interest rates or you're doing other things. Because there's other things that involve printing money. There's a lot of ways that a government or a reserve bank prints money or puts money into the system, right? But we'll go into that in a video. Maybe I should do another video. I'll do a video about it, right? 3 ways that the reserve bank print money. Okay, that's a video idea. Gonna put it somewhere. Gonna write it. Okay. Anyways, I'm done now with Jerome. I wanna do like